Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. For this game, we're going to be looking over the worst game I have played in a very, very long time. Over the board game, I've played my fair share of really terrible bullet games, but this is the worst over the board game I've played in a very, very long time. The time control of this game, just to start out, was 25 minutes with a 10-second increment, so we had a lot of time to think. And the ratings you see on the screen are going to be our USCF ratings, so they're going to be around 400, 500 points below chess.com ratings, if you care about that stuff. Now, this game was very, very embarrassing. I made like, I think 4 blunders, a terrible amount of moves, and all of my ideas were genuinely, genuinely awful. But let's get into the game. So I start off the game with, of course, in all bad games, a move that you don't really play very often. I played the move e4. Now, e4 isn't a move I normally play in these positions. Well, in the opening positions. I'm normally a d4 player, but I've been trying to learn e4 for a bit of a while, and if I'm being honest, I haven't really understood many of the lines, and I was trying to try it out in a semi-serious game, being 25 plus 10. So e4, my opponent responded with e5 and went directly into a line that I didn't really know too well and didn't have that much experience with it. So my coach is recommending me to play into a 4-knight Scotch, and I don't really know this opening, but I do know the first couple moves. So that's what we entered: knight f3, knight c6, knight c3, knight f6, and the move pawn to d4. My opponent takes on d4, knight takes d4, and plays into the main line of bishop b4, where I already have to start thinking because I genuinely just don't understand these positions very well, and I'm on my own. So I spend some time, I spend about a minute here, and I'm thinking to myself, in what ways can I play this? Because of course my opponent is threatening to take the pawn here. I'm trying to make sure it's not an idea. Like bishop e3 is an idea of mine. I thought that was kind of interesting. If I play bishop e3, what if he just takes the pawn? I don't think I have anything there. F3 I thought would made a little bit of sense with it. I'm like, why am I weakening my king's diagonal in the future? There's no reason to do this. This isn't a Sicilian after all. And I thought, okay, the only move that makes logical sense that doesn't hang the pawn on move has to be the move knight takes c6. So I think for a little bit, I think for about a minute, and I play the move knight takes c6, which turns out to be the top engine move. My opponent captures with bc, which is very logical. If you take like this, I believe I can go queen d8, king d8, and I thought just bishop g5 or something, and I just play long castles. Computer actually just likes bishop d2 better and then long castles afterwards, where white just has a pretty excellent position. Like for example, if you just get hungry like this, I check you, king e7, and well, actually in that position I would win the knight. So let's say something like this, I can simply like take on g7 and move my rook somewhere to not blunder this idea, and white should be doing quite well. Or bring the bishop back to d4 to defend the pawn. So, okay, my opponent didn't go for that. My opponent went for bc6 because, of course, he plays e5. This is just his actual lines. And I defend my pawn with the move bishop to d3. Very logical moves. He goes castles. I thought, well, okay, I know that these positions aren't that crazy. Let's not go wild. I'm just going to castle also. It can't really be bad. And my opponent plays the move pawn to d5. Now, this is all prep. My opponent knew this before the game, I believe, but I have seen this a couple of times. I still didn't really understand it, and I was thinking here for quite a while. Again, so my opponent is already up on the clock at this point, around 2 or 3 minutes, and after this next move, my opponent is up 5 minutes on the clock. And if I'm being honest, I'm playing a lower rated player. I really, really hate being lower on time when I'm playing someone lower rated than me, because it just allows them to get some advantage that they normally wouldn't get against me, and it's genuinely just makes the game much more annoying for me to try and win. So I'm thinking for a little bit, and I thought I had a decent idea. I thought, okay, I can't really do anything with this pawn. Like, if I defend this pawn, then this pin is a problem. If I go with, like, queen f3, I was worried about something like bishop g4 in some lines, and I wasn't too okay with that. Also, this pawn is still hanging. If I, like, sacrifice the pawn and argue that he has weak isolated c-pawns over here, I also didn't think that was enough because, well, he has the bishop here, he's open space, and if anything, this c-pawn isn't really that weak. Like, I can't go and target it with any of my pieces. if anything, it's actually good for him because it's blocking my knight from entering the position, and if my queen gets somewhere like here, I don't think it's that big of a deal. He can defend it in multiple different ways here, something like this. So I decided that the best way to play was just to take the pawn on d5 and go for a line where I get my dark square bishop out, finish my development with the move bishop to g5. And this makes a lot of sense. This makes a lot of sense. In fact, in this position, I have a very easy threat. A very easy threat. Now, you might be considering at this point, well, this is the worst game you've ever played, right? You haven't made like any mistakes. Every move you played is like the top engine move, a book move. It's totally fine, right? Well, here the mistakes are coming in. If you can see my easy threat, it's very easy. And I saw it when I played the move bishop g5. Okay, so my threat is very simple. I want to take on f6. I want to take on f6. If queen takes f6, I take here. I take here. You can't win this pawn back because of rook b1, and I pick up your bishop with the knight coming over. Let's just put that on the board, for instance. Let's just play a random move. Like here, I can take on f6, queen f6, here, here, here. And I win the bishop. My opponent can do this, and if he is not able to do that, then I'm simply up a pawn. If my opponent takes back with the g-pawn, of course, this is just going to be completely lost. My opponent's king is way too weak for it to be of any use here. I should be perfectly fine, not to mention immediate tactics like knight d5 takes and bishop h7. So I thought this move was pretty interesting. I thought this move was pretty interesting. And I was so sure my opponent wasn't going to blunder anything here. I was so sure my opponent wasn't going to blunder this silly tactic, right? So my opponent, the best move here is c6. This is just the best move. My opponent plays a pretty standard move also. He plays h6. That's an easy move, right? It's just like hitting my bishop, but now I have to come back. I spend 2 seconds to play bishop h4. Now that's not a good move. Because of the very simple idea that I had just said to play the move bishop takes f6, queen takes, and knight takes d5. Let's say something like, I don't know, you have to defend the bishop, I guess. Something like this. I can just take, play b3. I'm up a pawn. And really, my opponent has no compensation for it. That would have been nice. Yeah, I think that'd be pretty nice if I had that position. Yeah, so I played bishop h4. And I just hate myself so much for this move. And in fact, after I played it, I think this is one of the only times I've ever like actually written something besides the actual chess notation on my sheet. I wrote, I believe, I have the sheet here. What did I write? Yes, I wrote 7 question marks next to the move bishop h4. Because bishop h4 is the stupidest move I could have possibly played in this position, and I hate myself. So, let's be done with that now, okay? Now, bishop h4, what it does is it still keeps the position equal, right? The position is still plus 0.1. This is just fine. My opponent plays c6 after, and we actually transpose back into some prep. But at this point, my opponent has the psychological advantage on me. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, the psychological advantage isn't something that normally happens in chess. It's isn't something that happens on the board in chess. It's not a position, not anything up on the board. The psychological advantage happens when basically someone really makes you angry, or someone is able to trick you in a way, make you forget something, make you really mad at yourself, and make you stop playing as well as you normally do. My opponent gets that fully on me here. I am in the dumps. I am in the dumps after this move bishop h4. I hated myself after bishop h4. But it's okay because there's still chess to play and I still have a game to win. But it just means that it's going to be a lot more difficult for me to actually play the correct moves. After the move pawn to c6, I wanted to wash myself from this game and I wanted to get it over as quickly with as possible. I still need to win because my opponent's so much lower rated than me. But I thought that the best way to win, I just want to end it quickly, which is never the right approach. So I first played the move a3, which I thought was an interesting move. A3, I thought if he took on c3, I can just take back with the b pawn, something like this. And these pawns aren't really that bad because I can play a move like c4. I'm totally fine. I have the bishop pair to open space. Pretty decent position. I fully expected his next move to be the move bishop to d6 or bishop to e7. Bishop to e7 made a lot of sense because he's getting out of the pin. Pretty logical, and he's able to move his knight in some cases. but I thought that the more natural move was actually to play bishop d6, which is what he played, simply targeting my king side over here and making it a little uncomfortable for me to play. I thought for a little bit about how I want to proceed in the game. I thought that queen f3 was probably my best option, like my best plan in the position. But I thought that queen f3 was a little too early now because I was worried about some bishop g4 business. If I were to play queen f3 now, which I didn't play in the game, I thought that maybe something like g5, bishop g3, and something like bishop g4. And I wasn't sure if my position was actually that good because I go here now. He's able to get some tempi on me. Not there, of course. He's able to get some tempi on me. And I'm not sure that I really love this position. The engine considers it to be pretty good. Says that black really has nothing with this whole initiative. But I was like, why allow this in the first place? This is too scary to let live. So instead, I decided to simply play the move pawn to h3, which also, but one, defends the g4 square, and two, now there's not a pawn on h2 for my opponent to target with some battery in the future. And for the record, if my opponent were to play g5, my intention after bishop g3 and bishop takes g3 was always to take with the f-pawn anyway, so I thought this wasn't that big of a deal in order to open up my rook right. I did want to end the game quickly. So my opponent thinks for a little bit, plays the move rook to e8. At this point, my opponent is up 10 minutes on me on the clock, which is pretty bad. Let's say, I don't remember the exact timing controls. I think I'm around at 10 minutes. My opponent's at 20 minutes. He hasn't thought much in the opening. And I just wanted to give him something to think about. I wanted to even out the time, make it a little bit more difficult for him to think, give him some real problems. So I decided, okay, my point of pawn to h3 was to stop the move bishop g4 in order to play the move queen f3. I feel like I've done that. Let's play queen f3. Now, queen f3 is a mistake, but it's not really a mistake in any conventional means. The reason why queen f3 is a mistake is because, actually, black gets a pretty big attack. If I was in like a classical game, I think I would have seen this, but in a rapid game, I don't fault myself, even though I was in a really bad mood at this point. I think it's completely understandable to not miss the reason why queen f3 is a problem. The reason why it's a problem is actually this move g5. And after bishop to g3, my opponent has this really nice follow-up of the move g4. And this I didn't see. This I really didn't see. And the point is that I can't take the pawn because bishop g4 traps my queen, which is quite nice with the rook on e8 covering everything and the bishop being able to cover that diagonal. I'd have to go queen d1. He would take it, and think I'm simply down a pawn. But if I'm being honest, I don't know if black's position is that much better because his king is really exposed, and even if you see this line with black, it's a little difficult to go with it just because of the common knowledge that the king is a little too exposed. But obviously, if you take some time and some effort to really calculate the position, you'll find that this is definitely the best way to play. But instead of that, my opponent went for a different line. My opponent, I don't think, was also playing for a win here. I think, if I'm being honest, he was a little bit rattled after playing this move h6. Because he, of course, realized immediately that bishop f6 was the best move in that position. And he was also a little bit annoyed at himself, but not as much as I was. I don't think, at least from talking to him after the game. He played the move pawn to a5. I don't think he was very ambitious this game, is what I'm trying to say. I think he was trying to play for some equality, and his basic idea was he wanted to trade off the bishop on a6 and that. Yeah, also b4 is technically stopped, but I don't think it was that big of a deal to begin with. So he goes with a5, which is an interesting line, but it does allow me to be pretty simple. What I could have done here, what I didn't go for, and what I actually stand by this decision. The coaches told me that this wasn't a good decision, that what I played, well, I'm not going to tell you what I played yet, but the idea to not go with bishop f6 here, I think, was quite a good one, because after queen f6, queen f6, gf6, let's say bishop a6, wait, sorry, it's white's move, let's say rook e1, for instance. I thought that this position was really difficult to play for me. I didn't want to go for this line, mostly because, if I'm being honest, I don't see how my rook is going to be able to do anything on this file. Let's say rook e1, king f8, for instance, just defending this pawn. I can put my rook on this square, but my rook isn't really doing anything here. This bishop is a really good defender of the g3 square. This square isn't really going to be much of anything because my opponent can always, at minimum, play the move king e7 and like have a decent position. But at maximum, my opponent does have the bishop pair. My opponent has the extra bishop. And worst of all, my opponent has this really bad weakness on b2. And I didn't see an easy way to defend this weakness from afar, and I thought that this was probably not in my best interest to go for this line. My opponent's going to trade off light squared bishop, and then he's going to put pressure on b2, and it's going to be a very, very dangerous position. So I didn't want to go for this line, and I think I was right to not go for this. But, of course, the move I played wasn't very good. I should be playing normal here. I should be playing a move like rook fe1, for instance. Very, very simple move. Very, very simple move. I'm just trying to put my rook on the f file, on the e file. I'm trying to bring it into the game. I have two pieces that haven't been developed yet, these two, and I want to bring them into the game. Of course, you can maybe argue that the knight is really misplaced, but alas, these pieces technically haven't moved, so I need to bring my rooks into the game. Rook fe1 would be a really good move, but instead, I, wanting to end the game very, very quickly, decided to go with the move g4. And g4 in of itself has no idea. It has zero intentions besides scaring the opponent. There's nothing concretely good about g4 really at all. Like, even if I get g5, let's just say white gets an extra move here. Let's say, I don't know how to make this work. Bishop e7. Even if I get g5, this position is just bad for me. Like, this is just bad. I don't think this is what I wanted at all, because even though I open up some files here and I maybe can go like king h1, rook g1, this is a very, very slow idea, and in all honesty, my annoyance with myself of missing bishop h4 really led up to this big mistake of g4 later on in the game, and I don't think that I can very easily recover from this move if my opponent plays correctly, just not caring at all about it. Well, HG is necessary, but then not caring at all after HG, and I don't really see any big issue after G5 for black. So my opponent, still not playing for too much, decided to play the move bishop a6. This is a pretty interesting move. This is just following up on his idea with a5, but I think he should have tried to do something else here. And I was thinking for a while here. I was thinking for a good long time. Now I'm under 10 minutes at this point. I believe I was at around 5 or 6 minutes. And my opponent's still at like 16. It's like, this is not good time management by me, but of course I'm trying to make things happen in the position, and my opponent still had the advantage in the opening where he knew what to do and I didn't. Bishop a6, I thought for a good bit. I'm trying to make this attack work as much as I possibly can, and I thought that the best way to do it, just from a conceptual standpoint, I didn't really calculate anything here. I thought the best way to do it was bishop takes a6, first putting the rook on the square, and I thought in this position I might have some tactics with the rook being on a6, and I might be able to get some weird queen d3 in some position, weird queen e2 maybe if the rook is blocked, and I was looking for some ideas here, trying to make something work, and I thought the only way to play here, the only way that makes any sense logically, is to play the move g5, which is not a good move. Which is pretty clearly not a good move, actually. Pretty clearly not a good move. And it's not a good move for, honestly, like, every reason. Like, any move my opponent plays here that doesn't just, like, hang the knight in one move, you're just fine with black. You're totally fine with black. The only move that's, like, you don't play is knight h7, but, I mean, come on, knight h7 is a very bad move. My idea with this move was I didn't think he was going to take. I thought he was going to move like the knight somewhere, and I thought I would play g6, threaten some idea with the king and the rook, so my opponent has to do something with it. The queen would be hanging in that position, so my opponent probably has to play knight f6, is what I thought. I thought my opponent would play knight f6, and then my intention was to take, and find some other way around. Maybe just rook fe1 and bring my pieces like this. The king is a bit weak. I can maybe play like a king h1 and like bring the rook on the g file in some lines. I still have a bit of an attack, and I was kind of optimistic about my chances here, but still I was still reeling from the move earlier, bishop to h4. My opponent decided to play the move knight e4, which is one of the moves in the position that works for my opponent. And, of course, the only move here is to play the move g6, which I played pretty quickly. And, in fact, I actually missed something here. I thought my opponent had to play knight f6. I didn't really see anything else, if I'm being honest. If my opponent played f6, I thought this was just a mistake. By the way, my opponent did play f6. I thought this was just a mistake. I thought there was no reason to let my pawn be this active against this king. Now he has all sorts of back rank issues. It's a little bit difficult for my opponent to play. But in fact, I actually missed a very, very nice move. This move, queen d7. And black is just like almost winning. Black is just almost winning. Takes, queen of 7, king of 7. And the best line is actually just to like sack a pawn with bishop g3 and give up the pawn. If I can like take this, maybe rook e4, bishop g3, let's say bishop g3, fg check, king g6, maybe king e6 is better. Peter likes king e6 better, but I don't know, it all seems fine. This endgame is just better for black. It's simply better for black. Why is it better for black? Because for one, black's king is more centralized. Two, this pawn on b2 is still a huge problem for the white side, and I have to do something about it immediately. And three, if I don't go and contest the file, if I play like a move like, if I don't play a move like rook f2 or like here, then my opponent's just going to get on the second rank and destroy all my pawns. I will lose the game 9 times out of 10. So this would have been a very, very excellent idea. Just going queen d7, allowing this whole trade, and getting a really good position, because at the end of the day, these pawns are split, and I will have to do something with that, and the rook endgame is just amazing for black. So this was all very, very bad, but luckily my opponent played the move f6, which I thought was just the worst way to defend your queen, but okay, my opponent can do that. And I played, after a little bit of thought, I played the move queen d3 without any real idea behind it. The point of queen d3, I just wanted to hit the rook, maybe put some pressure on the file, do something like this. Maybe I can put the rook here, and also defend against this fork that my opponent was threatening of the queen and the rook. My opponent decided to go with the second best line. Knight c5 would have been better here, but I thought that I could maybe play like queen f5, and then I could get my rook into the game, and I didn't think this would be so bad for me. Like minimum I can play bishop g3 and I can take this. Apparently this is just really bad. I guess I underestimated this idea, but whatever. Instead, my opponent played the move queen d7, which technically sacrifices a rook, but I obviously can't take this because after takes, queen h3, there is no way to stop the checkmate. Let's say f4. My opponent can go like queen g4 or king h1, and there should be some way to win. Like, yeah, takes here, and yeah, I don't know, something. There's going to be like some pretty easy way to win down the road here. I don't think this needs much explanation. So after queen d7, I was thinking for a little bit. I knew I couldn't take the rook. I tried to make it work. I tried to make it work, but I thought that the best option to do was simply to play this move knight takes e4. And I was expecting, if I'm being honest, I was expecting this move de for some reason. I don't know why I was expecting this move de. It's just not a very good move. But he played the move rook e4, and I honestly thought that rook e4 was a big mistake here. Well, no, sorry, I didn't think that rook e4 was a big mistake, but I thought that it allowed me to kind of consolidate my forces and enter into a position that, if anything, was not better for black. So I played the move bishop g3. I thought that my opponent maybe could go for something like takes it in some lines. I didn't really think so. Like, if he takes it, I guess I can just take it and he loses. Maybe he could just bring the rook back and try to reconstruct his forces here. But instead, my opponent decided to take on g3. And I thought that here I was actually doing perfectly fine because I took on a6 now, and I was like, oh well, now you don't have any mate, because in this position, if he takes here, I'm checkmating him because of my pawn on g3 that my opponent left earlier in the game. And now my position's not doing so bad, and actually white is probably pushing here. Black has to be pretty careful in order to survive, but my opponent was very careful. My opponent played the only move in the position, in fact a move that I didn't even consider, but it's quite a good one. This move bishop b8 is what he played. And this is the only move in the position. Why is it the only move in the position? Because if my opponent played something else like bishop d6, for instance, I can play like rook fe1. My opponent can, and my opponent is unable to, wait, sorry. My opponent does not have the firepower necessary to play a move like queen takes h3, because now I have this move queen a8 check, and I thought that bishop f8 made a lot of sense, but now rook e4, my opponent is unable to continue with the attack, and in fact, white is just up the exchange. I can play basically whatever here, as long as I'm not like losing on the spot. Like a move, very simple move like queen b8 should be fine, just defending this diagonal, and white is up in exchange. White is probably just winning the game. But okay, my opponent played the only move bishop b8. And the point is that now, after this move queen h3, which is threatened, I don't have this check on a8, and my opponent will be fine. And the queen from h3 will still be continuously guarding the move, the square on c8 where the queen can also take. So, I thought for a little bit here, and I completely blunder. For, I believe, in this game, this is the third time I've made like a crushing mistake. The first one was this idea of the first one was bishop h4, then g4, and now the next crushing mistake. I played the move rook fe1, and black is completely winning again. Black is completely winning for an idea that's very easy. Of course, in this position, I had very little time on the clock. I believe I was already down to around a minute 30, and my opponent had around 10 left, so this is a little more forgivable. Oh my goodness, I can't speak today. This is a little bit more forgivable, but it's still really awful. And I saw this idea immediately after I played the move rook fe1. My opponent can just take on h3 and I lose. It's like such a simple plan. I just completely missed it. Like I take here, my opponent goes check here, check here, check here, mate. Like the easiest checkmate possible, and I walk directly into it. In fact, the only move here that doesn't lose, well, there's three moves. Okay, the best move in this position that makes the most sense is to play this move queen d3, simply defend the pawn on h3, and white's fine, but white's honestly no longer winning. Black has a lot of compensation with his very strong bishop, and white has just moved their queen out of harm's way. There are other moves here, like f3 technically works, but I think it's very, very scary. I wouldn't play f3. And this move, queen b6, is okay, just to target the bishop and make sure that I'm okay. In this position, after bishop c7, I go queen to b3, and it's just defending this h-pawn from a different square than d3, but d3 is simply the better line. But this game goes on after rook fe1. My opponent does not find the move bishop takes h3, queen takes h3, and in fact, in the postmortem analysis, my opponent told me that he never saw the move queen takes h3 in this position, even with 8 minutes on the clock. My opponent played a counter blunder, queen to f5, and white is up to +5 with a very, very, very simple way of playing. The very easy move, rook takes e4, wins the game here. It just wins the game. This is what I play. I play rook takes e4. My opponent cannot take on g6 because of the very simple move, rook to g4. If my opponent takes with the queen, I saw this, there's queen c8 checkmate in 2, the queen blocks, and then I take it. So what can my opponent do? My opponent has to take back with the e-pawn. Only move, take back with the e-pawn. And now, if I had any brain left in my head, I would have played the move queen c4, king h8, queen f7, and this video would have never been made because I'm just going to checkmate black. I'm happy. It's a good game. Well, it's not a good game, but I managed to win. Nothing terrible or out of the ordinary. Too much happened besides this move bishop h4, and I probably wouldn't even checked with the engine. But instead, I do not play the move queen c4, and instead I honestly had one of the worst brain aneurysms possible, not even noticing that the g3 pawn is under attack. I didn't see that. I genuinely didn't see that the g3 pawn was under attack in this position. I thought my opponent was only trying to play this move. Oh my goodness. I was so blinded by honestly just bishop h4. I've said this a lot this video, but bishop h4 I could not stand. I couldn't get this taste out of my mouth, and I thought my opponent was going to resign after my next move rook d1, which isn't that bad.
I thought my opponent would play queen g5, king f1, and would resign. This is how I thought the game would end. I have no idea how I missed that the g3 pawn was hanging, like how terrible I was playing today, but it's all right. My opponent took on g6. I played king f1, and he played the move king h7 in order to stop queen c8 from winning the bishop. Sorry. King h7 was not played here. Sorry. No, he played the move bishop h2, trying to get some ideas on this flank. Maybe there's going to be some perpetual. I don't know. It's a little scary. I have to be a little careful. And I decided that the best way to play this was to simply simplify into a winning rook versus bishop endgame with this check, king h7, and the move queen to g4. My opponent can't really go back with the queen because then I'm going to have some checks here. I'm going to be perfectly fine. There's honestly no way that white could ever lose this position. You know what? I'd find a way comparing with my mood for this game, but alas, we will never know. And this, honestly, queen g4, this idea of queen c8, queen c4 is a pretty good idea. After my opponent takes, the bishop endgame versus rook is very, very easy, and it should just be a pretty simple win for white. And that's what I was looking forward to. I was like, oh, okay, I played a bad game, but I'm gonna be okay. I win the game at least. I don't lose. But okay, my opponent keeps playing on. He plays the move bishop e5. Okay. Now, keep in mind, I have very little time at this point. I'm playing off of an increment. I have around 20, 30 seconds. There's 10-second increment every move. I have to be very, very fast, but I played a very bad move. I should have played the move b4 very, very quickly, just trying to get some position like this, and we have a pretty easy game. Well, actually, in this position, I would take first, and then I would take here. Oh, actually, the computer wants a4. Probably I would take here, though, and play this position, which should just be a pretty simple win for white. But instead, I decided to play this move b3. And now I have a little bit more to think about, because if my opponent is able to get something like this after this move a4, like let's say bishop e2, a4, bishop a3, if my opponent's able to get this bishop on b4 in some lines, I was a little bit worried that maybe he'd get a fortress. And I know that this fear is unfounded, but he has this 4-on-2 on the king's side. It's a little scary. Of course, I'm always able to play c3, but my brain, having so little time on the clock, didn't really clock that at this point. So I played the move b3. My opponent goes bishop e2. I was cursing myself, and I decided in this position I would simply try to go to a position where I don't have to push this a-pawn, and instead I took the queen, king g6, and I played this move rook d6. Now, you might be wondering, wait a second, this is a really easy winning endgame. Yes, it is a really easy winning endgame. Let's see how I managed to lose. So, after move rook d6, I'm simply trying to take. If my opponent takes on a3, I take on c6. Winning endgame very easily. Passed pawn, I win the game. This pawn is a weakness too. If I can win it, I get 2 passed pawns. My opponent's king side is not fast enough. I win the game. So my opponent plays the move c5. Now I play the move rook a6. My opponent plays bishop a3, and I take on a5. Bishop to b4, and then move rook b5. Currently I've played perfectly. I'm going to play c3 next move. I'm going to take on c5. I have a passed pawn. Very easy winning endgame. Again. But my opponent starts doing some things on the king side. And if I'm being honest, these things amount to absolutely nothing. He plays the move f5. Okay, well, I go with my plan. It's an easy endgame, right? I play c3, bishop c3, rook c5. Remember, I have very low time on the clock. I have to play fast, no time for too much thinking. I just think that this is my opponent's like final death throes, and he's going to resign in just a few moves. My opponent goes bishop d4. I think for a little bit. I play the move rook c6 check, king h5, and I kind of start to get a little bit nervous. This fear is very, very unfounded. My king is here. There's no way that my opponent's really going to be in time for any counterplay on the king side. But I saw a position where eventually I would push my pawn. My opponent would sack his bishop for it. I would take. I would be up a rook. But my opponent would somehow be able to get these pawns far enough down the board that his king gets to the a8 square, the pawn gets to a7, and he makes a draw.
And I was just not having it. So I didn't want any of that. I decided simply, okay, I'm not going to allow any of that crap. I play the move king to g2. Now the king isn't able to come here. I realized that my opponent didn't really have any counterplay like this. If he does this, I can always go to g1. I should be perfectly fine. If my opponent pushes this pawn too far, I'm always okay. So I thought this was perfectly okay. My opponent played king h4, and I played the move b4. Now I'm like, okay, I'm going to push my pawn. My opponent's king can't get it. I was completely expecting this move f4. And after f4, my idea was I was going to go here. My opponent was going to play f3. I was going to go here. My opponent was going to like move the bishop somewhere. Not there. I was going to take the pawn. My opponent was going to take here. I was going to go here. I was going to win this pawn too. 2 pawns versus a rook is not even close. My opponent can't get into a8. Easy win. Pretty simple lines, right? But my opponent played a terrible move. Keep in mind, my opponent has 7 minutes on the clock at this point. My opponent has 7 minutes on the clock. I am playing on, like, I have, like, 15 seconds. I'm playing on complete increment. And my opponent played this move in, like, 4 seconds. And after the game, he told me he blundered my response. He played the move e3. And e3, you might be seeing, loses a bishop in one move. This move wins a bishop. The king is pinned. The bishop can't move. I win the game. Very, very easy. And that's what I played. So rook c4 loses the game on the spot. My opponent told me that he didn't even realize that he had hung his bishop in move and that rook c4 was winning. He didn't even see his response here. But he is winning. And he figured it out. He played the move pawn to e2. And I realized in this position that I am losing. My king is unfortunately unable to rejoin the pawn and stop this one. If I take with check, the king simply moves. I don't have, not there actually, because then f4, but he goes here. I don't have enough firepower in order to survive. I will lose the game. And at this point, I started really panicking. I started cursing myself. All the normal things you do after you lose a chess game. And I played on a couple more moves, and then I resigned. Rook c1 is what I played. Played the move bishop c3. I can't defend the mate. I decided, okay, well, maybe I have something. I couldn't really calculate if my pawn made it fast enough in time, but I thought I would at least try. So I played the move b5, e1, queen takes. Push, 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 bishop c7, and in this position, I resigned the game. Topping off the worst game I think I have ever played with just an abysmal tactic that if I was thinking for actually 3 more seconds, I would have seen. fe3 is the best move. After fe3, white wins the game. In any case, this game was very, very bad. I made 4 very horrendous moves. Number 1, bishop h4. This was the one that really started off the entire game. Number 2, g4. This move was atrocious. What are you doing? Do not play g4 in this position. Number 3, if I'm being honest, g5. This move sucks also. My opponent simply wins the game here, enters an endgame where he is completely winning. g5 is terrible. But okay. Number 4, rook fe1. Blundering queen h3. Very, very simple. And last but not least, number 5, rook to c4. Losing the game after, if I'm being honest, a very, very topsy-turvy game where I was completely winning for a good while. Anyways, that's all I've got for you today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like and subscribe. And if you made it this long, I thank you. And I know that some of you might be knowing me as Mr. Mialkovich. I have since changed my name. There you go. That's why there's a fish there. And there's nothing else to say. Good evening and good night.